Today we're going on a journey across human history, a journey through the inventions that shaped, changed, and often completely turned our lives upside down. Let's be honest, without certain ideas, the world as we know it wouldn't exist. Just imagine a life without electricity, no light switches, no refrigerators, no smartphones, or a life without writing, no books, no contracts, no emails. Sounds unthinkable, right? But that's exactly what life looked like for most people for thousands of years. Everything we take for granted today is the result of a long chain of inventions, from stone tools to modern computers and artificial intelligence. About 2.5 million years ago, our ancestors lived a pretty simple life. No Netflix, no pizza, no central heating, just vibes and survival mode. But lots of wild animals, hunger, and the constant risk of becoming someone else's dinner. And then something decisive happened. Someone picked up a stone, hit it against another one, and behold, a sharp edge. With that, they could cut meat, split bones, or work wood. That was the moment when just surviving turned into the idea of improving. That first hand axe wasn't high-tech, but it was a game changer, because suddenly humans weren't just another animal in the food chain anymore. They could actively shape their environment. And so began a development that can be summed up in one sentence. Whenever life got tough, humans invented something to make it easier. Fire is probably the OG invention. Strictly speaking, discovered, not invented, but whatever. For humanity, it was like finding the cheat code for life. Suddenly, warmth, light, grilled meat instead of raw and wild animals went, nope, not going near that. At first, fire was like borrowing Mother Nature's Netflix password. Useful, but don't lose it. And then came the moment when humans learned to make fire themselves. Sparks from stones, pyrite against flint. That moment was basically DIY Kit, Survival Edition. Fire was also the foundation for everything that followed. Pottery, metalworking, city building. No fire, no bread, no glass, no rocket launches. Or shorter, fire was the first step toward technology. The next big revolution came around 10,000 years ago, and it completely turned our lives upside down. Agriculture and animal husbandry. Until then, humans lived as hunters and gatherers, always on the move. But then, someone asked the crucial question. Why keep wandering around when we could just grow the grain right here? Sounds normal today, but back then it was the first big revolution after fire. That was the beginning of agriculture. The Neolithic Revolution made people settle down, form villages, and store food. And surplus grain turned into beer. Some historians actually claim beer was the real reason agriculture began. And honestly, that checks out. They also started to tame animals. First dogs, then sheep, goats, and cattle. That had massive consequences. For the first time, there were surpluses. And surpluses mean time. Time for art, for crafts, for politics. That was the birth of civilization. The wheel. So simple, so brilliant, so human. Nature gave us eyes, a heart, a brain, but nowhere in nature does a wheel exist. That was our thing. Around 3,500 BC, the people in Mesopotamia thought, dragging sleds all day? Yeah, no thanks. Let's try something round. At first, it was just a potter's wheel. Only later did someone think of putting it on wagons, and the world literally started moving. The first wagons were war machines, Sumerian tanks powered by horses. Later, they became farm carts, trade vehicles, cities, basically our whole civilization. The wheel is such a basic tool that in every civilization game, it's one of the first techs to research, right next to animal husbandry. And let's be honest, without the wheel, there'd be no skateboards, no bicycles, no cars, not even those shopping carts that can't go straight. Now it's getting explosive. Gunpowder, originally invented by the Chinese around the 9th century, actually meant for fireworks. But in the West, people quickly realized you can also build weapons with it. Cannons, muskets, rifles. Suddenly, the way wars were fought changed completely. Few inventions have changed geopolitics so dramatically. Knights' armor became useless. Castles lost their defensive power, but also fireworks, New Year's Eve, Fortnite. It shows perfectly, inventions are often neutral. How we use them is up to us. Without gunpowder, there'd be no action movies with explosions. Michael Bay would be unemployed. With writing, history truly began. Before that, everything had to be passed on orally, and anyone who's ever played a game of telephone knows how unreliable that is. Around 3000 BC, the Sumerians started carving symbols into clay tablets. At first, it was all about practical stuff: storage lists, taxes, trade. But soon they could preserve information, record laws, and pass stories down through generations. Writing was the first way to preserve knowledge across time. It made administration, education, and literature possible. Fun fact: the ancient Egyptians had hieroglyphs, so complicated that it took archaeologists 1,000 years to decipher them again. Paper came from China around 100 AD. Before that, people wrote on bones, bamboo, or silk. Imagine TikTok scripts on bones, kind of impractical. With paper, knowledge could be stored cheaply. Before, a book was a luxury item, handwritten by monks, sometimes over years. But the real game changer came 4,000 years after writing, with Gutenberg in the 15th century, around 1450. The printing press. That made education explode. Suddenly anyone could learn. Well, anyone who could read. Ideas spread faster than ever. The Reformation, the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution. None of them would have been possible without printing. It was basically the Middle Ages version of the internet. It democratized knowledge and laid the foundation for the modern world, just with way more ink and far fewer cat memes. Lenses and mirrors expanded our senses. Optics was a silent revolution. Then came Galileo and thought, what if I just look through it the other way? And the telescope was born. Galileo was like, wait, the Earth isn't the center, the sun is. The church, yeah, that's heresy. Through that, we discovered that Earth isn't the center of the universe. Mind blow. Optics gave us astronomy, biology, later cameras, cinema, Snapchat filters. The microscope opened the world of the invisible, with Hooke and Leeuwenhoek, who first discovered cells and bacteria, and that in a single drop of water, there's more action than in an entire season of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. James Watt invents the steam engine in 1765 AD. It turned coal into motion. Factories shot up, railroads connected entire countries, steamships made the world smaller. That was the first industrial revolution. It marked the beginning of the machine age, the moment muscle power was replaced by technology. The steam engine was the symbol of the transition from an agrarian to an industrial society. The 19th century brought another acceleration, the motor. 1885, Daimler and Benz. What if we make gasoline explode inside a motor? And boom, the first car was born. Cars completely changed the world. Roads, cities, trade, tourism. People could travel faster. Goods could be delivered faster. Everything became more mobile. Of course, that also brought problems. Traffic jams, emissions, climate change. But even today, the motor shapes our everyday life like almost no other invention. And yes, also the annoying question: how much does gas cost right now? Thanks for that. Sure, lightning has always existed, but the first nerds like Franklin, Faraday, Tesla, and Edison turned it into an energy revolution. Basically, Avengers Electric Edition. It took time before we learned how to generate, store, and use electricity. In the year 1746, the Leyden jar, the first electricity storage. Electricity feels so normal today that we often forget how young it actually is. It's only been around for about 280 years. Today, lights, refrigerators, TikTok, everything runs on electricity. Fun fact, without electricity, this video wouldn't exist. So, thanks electricity. You could say, fire was humanity's first energy source. Electricity was the second. First, smoke signals, then messengers, then telegraphs in the 19th century. That cut message times from weeks to minutes. Back then you had to write letters and wait, days, weeks. Today, dude, why didn't you reply in 5 minutes? Then Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876. "Mr. Watson, come here, please," was the first conversation. Actually, that first phone call was just an emergency because he spilled acid. And with that, the telephone was born, and humanity started calling each other in the middle of the night. Radio and television created a shared public sphere. Communication is the nervous system of humanity. Without it, everything else would be impossible. The ancient dream of flying became reality in the 20th century. Every century had inventors trying clumsy flight experiments. Many crashed, yet again and again, people tried to imitate the flight of birds. The direction of these attempts completely changed when, in 1809, English researcher Sir George Cayley proved that flying machines needed rigid wings. German engineer Otto von Lilienthal used his calculations and, in 1891, developed a glider of his own design that could fly short distances. The next step was to combine such gliders with a power source. Samuel Langley built small models driven by propellers and combustion engines. They were meant to be large enough to carry a person, but failed. Then the Wright brothers, 2 bicycle mechanics from Ohio, succeeded on December 17, 1903, when Orville Wright made the first powered flight. And behold, they took off. Okay, only for 12 seconds, but hey, longer than some TikTok clips. Today we fly halfway around the world, sit in budget planes with legroom for hobbits, eat airplane pasta that always tastes the same, and people still clap when the plane lands. Flying has become so normal that we argue more about whether a suitcase still counts as hand luggage than about the miracle of traveling through the stratosphere in a metal tube. Computers, at first as big as a living room, today in your pocket. The digital revolution is the newest and perhaps the most powerful. In just a few decades, computers have conquered every aspect of life. Then came the internet in the 1960s, originally for the military, but now used by nearly everyone. Without computers and the internet, no ChatGPT, no Curious, no Netflix. Information is available anytime, and suddenly you can share animal videos with the whole world. We can talk to people on the other side of the planet, trade, share ideas. Of course, it brings new problems too. Fake news, surveillance, addiction. But it's undoubtedly the most defining invention of our time. If the history of inventions teaches us one thing, it's this: we never stand still. Whether quantum computers, AI, renewable energy, or space travel, every generation builds on the inventions of the ones before it. The question isn't whether new revolutions will come. The question is, which ones, and how will we deal with them? Because every invention is neutral, it's up to us to decide whether it becomes progress or danger. Inventions have shaped us as a species. They are the common thread of human history. They show that we're not just survivors, but creators of our own future. If you like this, leave a like, subscribe to Curious, and write in the comments, which invention could you never live without? And remember, without the wheel, no doner kebab. So, respect to the inventors. See you next time, and stay curious.